Hey everyone. Tonight we're stepping into a world where light doesn't come from switches, food doesn't come from supermarkets, and your day starts the moment the cold tells you to move or freeze. Imagine it a low roof, smoke-stained rafters, and the smell of wet wool and boiled turnip permanently etched into your nose. You don't rise with enthusiasm, you rise because lying down hurts more. Because your youngest has started coughing again. Because the fire died while you were asleep. You're not even sure it was ever really burning. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you really like what I do here. And tell me, where in the world are you listening from? And what time is it? I love imagining this story echoing across time zones and bedrooms like a whisper through history. Now, turn down the lights. Maybe turn on the fan for some soothing noise. And let's get started on tonight's journey together. You don't wake up, you come to the kind of coming to that feels less like waking and more like someone just poked you in the spine with the blunt end of a hoe. Your back hurts in that special medieval way, the way straw pillows and cold floors carve into bone over the years. You shift, and something under the blanket squeaks. It's probably a rat. You don't even flinch. Outside, it's still dark, but you know the light's coming. Your body's learned the rhythm of frost and sun the way others learn melodies. Your breath hangs in front of your face, thick and ghost-like. You don't stretch not because you don't want to, but because stretching invites pain. So instead, you just sit there, wrapped in sleep, worry, and a tunic that smells like smoke, wool, and yesterday's labor. There's no such thing as your own bed. There's one pile of straw, damp from breath and sweat, shared between your wife, two of your children, and the cat that refuses to catch anything but fleas. Last night you wrapped the baby tight and placed her closest to what was left of the fire. This morning, your breath fogs and her cheeks are red from the cold. You look around your home. It's a single room. The windows don't open, they're just slits covered with cloth nailed to the frame. The floor is dirt, literally dirt. When it rains, it's mud. When it snows, it's misery. In one corner sits your tools. A hoe with a split handle, a knife dulled to butter spreader levels, a wooden bucket with a metal patch that leaks anyway. You've named it twice out of frustration. Neither name was flattering. Somewhere outside, a rooster crows late. As always, it's not yours. You've never owned a rooster. It belongs to your neighbor Edric, who inherited 2 chickens and a functional sense of optimism. Historians still debate whether serfs in some regions could even own livestock independently. You wouldn't know you just sneak a few eggs when Edric's not watching. Your first step of the day is always the worst. The cold bites. You find your feet have been visited by chilblains again, those itchy little insults from winter that flare up just to remind you how weak your boots are. Which is funny because you don't have boots. You have wrappings, cloth tied with string, and a pair of wooden clogs that make every step sound like a toddler slapping a drum. You reach for your tunic. It's not clean. Nothing you own is. It's been patched so many times. It's now more patch than tunic. The original fabric may have been brown, or maybe gray, or maybe some now extinct sheep color, but whatever it was, it's long since been overpowered by ash and soil and time. You tie it at the waist with a length of frayed rope. Your belt broke years ago and the buckle disappeared into the ground. Sometimes you still dream about finding it, The baby stirs. You whisper a quiet prayer to whoever's listening that her fever broke. It didn't. You can feel the heat of her skin before you touch her. You don't know what's wrong. You've tried nettle tea, garlic tied around the wrist, and a holy charm the priest swore was authentic. He also said that for an extra coin, he could throw in a blessing. You didn't have the coin. The village healer told you once to boil dried horse tongue and rub the broth on her feet. You didn't try that one. Not because it sounded silly, nothing sounds silly anymore, but because horses are rare. And their tongues rarer. You've stopped questioning the logic. The same woman also told you to bury a frog under the hearth if your chicken stopped laying. You buried two. Didn't work. Still don't have chickens. Outside, the wind howls like it lost something. You grab your hatchet, not because you're cutting wood yet, but because it's comforting to have something solid in your hand. The handle has grooves from decades of palms and winters and calluses, some yours, some from your father, some from whoever owned it before he traded it for a bag of barley and a lie. You crouch beside what used to be the fire pit and poke at the ashes. There's still a whisper of warmth there, like an old friend who doesn't talk much anymore. You blow gently, cup your hands around a bit of dry grass you stashed under the bench, and hope it catches. It does. Barely. You nurse the flame until it grows enough to make the clay pot sweat. The baby's blanket rustles. Your wife doesn't stir. She probably didn't sleep. Today is probably Wood Day. You don't keep track. The seasons tell you more than calendars ever could. The ground is frozen. The frost has crept across the inside of the window cloth again, painting fragile spider webs you'll crush as soon as the wind picks up. You hope it stays. Beautiful things don't last long in huts like this. There's a smell in the air, one you know too well. It's the blend of last night's ash, damp straw, and a pot of barley that's gone slightly sour. You might still eat it. Waste not right. The dog outside howls. You don't own a dog either, but the neighbor's mongrel thinks your porch is his bed and your compost is his buffet. You don't mind. He scares off rats. Probably. Maybe. You glance at the corner shelf, 3 bowls. One cracked, one chipped, one wooden and warped by fire. You'll use the cracked one today. It matches your mood. You scrape some porridge into it and sigh. The baby cries again. Softer now. That's worse. You'd rather hear her scream. And so begins the day. No breakfast feast, no warm water basin, no servants laying out slippers. Just another morning where you wonder if you'll still be able to swing a scythe come spring. You step outside, and the world, sharp and still, greets you with a slap. The sky hasn't bothered to turn blue yet. The air smells like frozen dung and disappointment, but also just faintly. Like the hope that today won't be the day your rope belt snaps mid-chore. That's something, at least. You tie the rope around your waist a little tighter. It's fraying again, probably needs replacing. But what would you replace it with the string from the sackcloth already used? A length of twine from the bundle of firewood that's holding up the shutter? You think about borrowing Edric's spare, but you already owe him 6 eggs you'll never have. So, rope it is. The belt of champions. If champions were cold and underfed, your tunic hangs just long enough to keep your thighs from freezing. Beneath it, your hose sag at the knees and bunch at the ankles like a toddler's pajamas. They're tied up with willpower and not much else. One of them has a hole in the heel so wide your toes peek out like they're testing the weather. You reach for your work shoes, a generous term. They're wooden clogs. Mismatched. One is older than the other, with a crack that whistles if you step just right. They hurt your arches, your toes, and your feelings, but they're better than frostbite. You once tried to go barefoot in spring. Never again. Stepped on a thorn. Got an infection. You chewed on willow bark for 3 days and prayed to a saint you weren't sure existed. It eventually healed. Or maybe it didn't. You just got used to the limp. Your wife is stirring now. She's already tying up her wimple, brushing her hair with her fingers. She doesn't speak. Neither do you. Talking in the morning feels wasteful, like using your best cloak just to feed the pigs. She wraps a strip of linen around the baby's legs. The child's still warm, still too quiet. You watch her move through the same motions as yesterday and the day before and wonder when those motions started to feel like defeat instead of duty. Your eldest comes in, face flushed from the cold. His nose is red, his hands chapped. His eyes old in a way no 10-year-old's eyes should be. He's carrying a small bundle of sticks and a sheepish look that says he slipped on the ice again. You nod toward the fire. He kneels without a word. You throw on your good cloak, another exaggeration. It's mostly holes stitched together by ambition. The fabric hangs from your shoulders like it's trying to run away. There's a patch on the back shaped vaguely like France, which is ironic because you've never seen a map, let alone traveled beyond the neighboring village. Outside, the wind cuts through you like a church whisper. The skies turn to color that says, "Don't expect mercy." You nod to Edric, who's trudging down the lane with a bundle of reeds strapped to his back, and a look that says he's not in the mood for jokes. That's fine. Neither are you. Medieval weather has a way of murdering punchlines. Today is fence mending day. You remember now. The pigs got loose again last week and trampled the herb bed. Not yours, the Reeves. Which is worse. Much worse. The Reeve is the kind of man who measures firewood with a stick and fines you if your pile's too short. You gather your tools, a dull hatchet, a bent knife, and a hammer so wobbly it could double as a rattle. The handle's been wrapped with strips of old cloth, each one a layer of failed repairs and whispered curses. You think about sharpening it, but the grindstone cracked last fall and the nearest blacksmith wants a chicken. And a blessing. You sling the bundle of tools over your shoulder and step into the path. Your feet sink into the ruts left by ox carts and frost. The mud is slick, half frozen, and twice as treacherous. You nearly fall twice before reaching the road. Once you curse out loud. The wind responds with a flurry of stinging snowflakes. You consider apologizing. Halfway to the field, you pass the chapel. It leans like a drunk, its steeple slightly askew. The door tied shut with a bit of rope suspiciously similar to yours. The bell hasn't rung in weeks. The priest claims it's because of the weather. You suspect it's because he traded the clapper for a bottle of mead. You finally reach the fence. It's worse than you thought. One section has completely collapsed, and the rest sags like it's ashamed to stand. You set down your tools and take a deep breath. Cold air scrapes down your throat like dry straw. The first board you try to lift snaps in half. Of course it does. You look skyward and say something deeply theological, something like, "Really, you begin mending. Slowly, methodically. It's not elegant work, it's survival by splinter. Each board you manage to wedge back into place feels like a small victory. You hum to yourself. Not a song, really just a rhythm. It helps. Not with the work, but with the quiet. A flock of crows watches you from a nearby tree. One caws, like it's judging your carpentry. You consider throwing a rock. Instead, you mutter. You build a fence with one hand frozen and the other holding a hammer. That's more wishbone than tool. The crows don't reply. Typical. By midday, your fingers are raw. Your stomach growls like it's forgotten how to be polite. You reach into your satchel and pull out a crust of bread hard enough to qualify as a weapon. You dunk it in a bit of ale and chew slowly. It's not good, but it's calories. And calories are currency. You sit on a rock, watching your breath coil in front of you like smoke from a tiny, invisible fire. You close your eyes for a moment, just long enough to imagine what the king's doing. Probably sitting on something warm. Probably being handed food that didn't require scraping moss off the sides. Maybe someone's trimming his beard right now, whispering poetry. Historians still debate whether kings were genuinely interested in their people's well-being, or just worried about peasant revolts. You decide it doesn't matter. You'll never meet him. He's a portrait in a book you can't read. The fence isn't done, but the sun's dipping now. The clouds have turned the color of iron, and the cold has found its way through your cloak, your tunic, and into your chest like a debt collector. You gather your tools, you sling them over your shoulder, you cough once, sharp and wet. It lingers. That's not great. As you walk home, the wind picks up. The trees sway like they're whispering secrets. You don't ask what they're saying. You already know tomorrow will be colder. But you'll wake up. You always do. Not because you want to, but because no one else is going to fix that fence. The sun barely peeks above the tree line when you shuffle into the yard. Boots caked in a mud so sticky it feels like the earth itself is trying to keep you in place. You drop your tools with a dull clatter that scatters 2 chickens and earns a grunt from your neighbor's dog who is now, apparently, yours. You sigh. If he stays one more night, you're naming him. Inside. The fire is sullen, a sullen little glow hiding in the coals like a child who knows they've done something wrong. You prod it back to life with a half-charred stick and whisper encouragements that sound a lot like threats. It finally catches, and you drape your hands over the new flame. It doesn't warm you much, but it makes your fingers sting with sensation. That counts. Your wife's spinning wool in the corner, her foot pumping the spindle like it owes her money. Her hands move fast. Her eyes don't. They look distant, like they've wandered off to a place where there's warmth and rest. You don't disturb her. You catch sight of the baby. Finally asleep. Her fever's still high. You place a hand on her forehead. It's not boiling, but it's not better. You say nothing. Again, there's nothing to say. Then, you change. Not for comfort, just function. Off comes the mud-caked tunic. On goes the one with slightly fewer holes and fewer memories of falling in pig pens. You wrap a strip of cloth around your head, mostly to keep the wind from whistling into your ears like a bored ghost. Then you pick up your hatchet again. Because the firewood pile is low, again. There's something deeply unfair about a world where the fire that keeps your family alive is fed by your own slowly dying arms. You head toward the woods. Not far. Because you can't. The Lord's forest is off limits. His land, his trees, his rules. Historians still debate whether peasants were regularly punished for gathering firewood illegally, or whether local lords turned a blind eye. You decide not to test the theory. Instead, you head to the edge of the field, where the wind has already knocked down a few branches. Thank you, wind. For once. You swing the hatchet slowly, not out of caution, but because your arms still remember yesterday. Each swing is a sentence in a conversation between you and the cold. A plea, a bargain, a threat. You fill your arms with logs, not too many. Not too few. You once tried to carry more and tripped into the stream. That was a fun day. Wet socks and bruised pride. You head home. Each step a negotiation with balance. The logs shift, the mud pulls, and your breath clouds in the air like a puff of smoke from a pipe you can't afford. 100 paces to the hut. 99. 98. You count them like prayers. Or penance. Back home. Your wife still spinning. Your son's gone probably to the village to trade stale bread for old onions. You hope he's not trying to barter with the reeve again. The last time he tried, you almost had to give up your only pot. You set down the logs and sigh. That's the morning done. Sort of. There's always more. Always another task leaning in the corner, arms crossed, tapping its foot impatiently. You ladle out some leftover pottage into a wooden bowl that's warped like an old man's back. It smells like yesterday's disappointment. You eat it anyway. You don't even blow on the spoon, it's already lukewarm. Your teeth crunch on a bit of grit. You don't flinch. That's just what bread does now. It fights back. And you wonder just for a moment what it's like in the castle. You picture him, the king, waking up at the exact same hour. Except he's not dragging himself off a straw mat that smells like mildew and broken promises. No, he's surrounded by velvet and fur, in a bed large enough to host a small sermon. He stretches, not like a man in pain, but like someone deciding which part of the day to enjoy first. There's no cold, no wind sneaking through the roof. A fire has been burning all night, tended by a servant whose only job is to keep it alive. Imagine that. A whole person employed just to fight the chill. You chew another bite of barley mash and wonder what his breakfast smells like. Probably bread. Not the crusty, jaw-breaking kind you wrestle with, but soft white manchet bread, the sort made from sifted flour, kneaded by people with actual fingernails, baked in an oven that wasn't also used to warm your socks. He probably eats figs. You've only seen a fig once. It was dried. You traded your best spoon for it. Worth it. Almost in the castle, yeah, he might be listening to music. A lute, maybe? Something with strings and talent, and a rhythm that doesn't involve hauling logs or stirring slop. He might not even be eating alone. There could be poets nearby, reading lines that rhyme. One of them probably compares him to a lion, or an eagle, or a divine oak tree. No one's ever called you an oak tree. Not even sarcastically. You sigh again. Not out of jealousy. Just contrast. You finish the bowl. You scrape the sides with your finger. Not because you're hungry, though you are, but because wasting food feels like a crime. Actually, it is a crime. You once saw a boy whipped for stealing a heel of bread. He wasn't even trying to eat it, just smelled it too long. You rinse the bowl with a splash of gray water from the bucket. Then, You look at your hands, cracked, red. One knuckle is swollen, probably infected. You flex it, it pops. You consider that your daily luxury spa treatment? The afternoon is waiting. There's a gate that needs mending. The pig needs feeding. The thatch needs tightening before the next snow. But for a moment, just a moment, you sit in front of the fire, feel its warmth on your legs, and close your eyes. And somewhere in the castle, a king does the same. Only difference is he's doing it with wine. You stretch your back. It cracks in 3 places like old wood shifting in the cold. The warmth from the fire barely reaches your knees, but it's enough to let you pretend, for just a few heartbeats, that the cold hasn't settled into your bones. Then you hear the creak of the roof as the wind pushes against the thatch, and your little moment is gone. Time for breakfast, which is a strong word. Breakfast implies choice, options, a plate you actually look forward to. What you have is more like a negotiation with your stomach. You grab the pot still sitting near the fire, yesterday's pottage, thickened overnight into a gray lump that has begun to form edges. You stir it anyway. Break off a chunk of stale bread and ladle some of the paste into a bowl that's cracked but not leaking. That counts as functional. The kids are up now. The older one sniffs the air like a dog checking if the food is worth waking for. The younger just sits, glassy-eyed, rubbing sleep from a face that's too pale for comfort. You slide the bigger portion toward her. The older doesn't argue. He just eats, fast and silent, eyes flick into yours once, then back to the bowl. The baby is still sleeping, or unconscious. Either way, she's quiet. Your wife tears off a bit of bread and dips it in the pottage, chewing with effort. Her fingers are red from cold, and her nails are dark from ash and earth. She drinks from a wooden cup weak ale, bitter and barely fermented. You're not even sure it's safe, but it's safer than the stream. You take your share last, not because you're noble, just because you're tired. The bread cracks against your teeth. You soften it in the pottage. It doesn't help much. You chew slowly, thinking about the time you bit into a pebble and cracked a molar. You spat the tooth into your hand and kept eating. You didn't even tell anyone. It didn't seem important. There's not much conversation. Talking wastes warmth. And what would you say hope today's mud is less slippery? Maybe the pig won't escape this time. No one wants to hear that, especially not first thing in the morning. A rooster crows outside? That smug tone again. Definitely Edric's bird. You glare in the general direction of Edric's yard. Someday, that bird is going to be soup. You'll probably be the one to make it. Not out of spite, just hunger. You lean back on the stool, just a plank nailed to 2 stumps. Really, and watch your breath curl in the air. You glance at the wooden saint nailed to the wall, its features worn away by time and hopeful fingers. You don't know the name. Might be a martyr, might be a bishop. You nod at it anyway, just in case. You murmur the same prayer you always do, half Latin, half nonsense. It doesn't matter, the rhythm is what counts. That cadence that makes your mind go still for a moment, like rocking a baby to sleep. Historians still debate whether peasants were deeply religious or just fearful of punishment from God and man alike. You suspect it's both. You've seen too many things go wrong too quickly to not believe something bigger is pulling the strings. You just wish that something occasionally looked your way. Outside, the light changes. Not quite sunrise. More like a faded blur. Like someone smeared a candle across the horizon. That means it's time. The morning meal, if you can call it that, is over. You hand your bowl to your wife, who stacks it carefully beside the others. There's not enough water to wash them yet. Maybe later, maybe not. You tie your cloak tighter, grab your tools, and head out the door. The cold hits you like a memory. Your nose runs immediately. Your eyes sting. You wipe both with your sleeve and move on. Today, you've got 2 jobs waiting. Check the fence again and see if the communal oven has a spot left. You've got a tiny bit of flour left, and you're hoping to turn it into something that feels like bread. Not tastes like, just feels on the path. Your feet slip in a rut frozen solid from the night. You catch yourself on a fence post. No one sees. You pretend it didn't happen. You keep walking. The village is half-stirred smoke from a few chimneys. Goats complaining. Someone shouting at a stubborn ox. You pass the Reeves' house. The shutters are closed, but you know he's awake. You can feel his eyes, like a draft from under the door. You tip your head slightly, neither deference nor challenge. Just acknowledgement. That's the safest path. Further down, you spot a woman hanging laundry. Brave soul. The linens will freeze before they dry. You nod. She doesn't nod back. Might be mourning, might just be out of patience. The communal oven is at the far end of the village near the well. A few others are already there. A line has formed. You sigh. Of course it has. One man's loaf puffs with flour. You know he couldn't have grown. Maybe he traded something. Maybe he stole. You don't ask. You just add yourself to the line. You trade some dried leeks for a turn at the coals. You pat out a disc of dough, half barley, half mystery. Maybe rye, maybe weed seed. You don't ask questions when the miller sells it cheap. You flatten it, score it, and place it on the warm stone. It crackles slightly. That's a good sign. While it bakes, you sit on a low wall. A dog sniffs your leg. You ignore it. It licks your ankle anyway. You don't move. It's warm. That's enough. Someone starts singing nearby. A worker's song. The kind with no beginning and no end. Just a beat to keep the hands busy. You know the tune. You hum along. Your loaf is ready. Barely risen, hard as pride. But it smells edible. You wrap it in a bit of cloth and tuck it under your arm like it's treasure. You head home through the mud. Your feet ache. Your back reminds you that bending is a privilege. But the fire will be waiting. And you've got half a loaf and the memory of warmth. And in a castle far away, the king is probably finishing his feast. His bread will be white and soft, served with honey and fruit you've never seen. He'll eat while someone recites a poem. He'll wipe his mouth with cloth finer than your wedding tunic. He'll leave half of it untouched. And your stomach grumbles at the thought of crumbs you'll never taste. You make it home just in time for the clouds to start threatening. Not a real storm, not yet. Just that dull gray warning that the sky gives when it's thinking about ruining your day. Again, you duck inside, the warmth of the fire barely brushing your face as you enter, and set the half loaf down with all the reverence of a king placing a jewel on velvet. Your wife glances at it and nods. That's as close to celebration as it gets. Your son peers over, eyes wide. You break the loaf in half and hand him the bigger piece. He doesn't thank you. He just eats. Crumbs tumbling down his tunic like confetti at a very sad birthday party. There's still the fence to check. You can't keep putting it off. The pig's Edrics this time have taken to wandering. One of them left you a steaming gift on your threshold yesterday. You said some things. The pig didn't care. So you pick up the hammer and the few bent nails you salvaged from that broken stool last spring. You tell your wife you'll be back by sundown. She doesn't answer. She's still spinning, the rhythm of her foot like a ticking clock that no one dares wind. You head toward the field again, this time with the tools dragging behind you like guilty thoughts. The mud grabs your feet. Every step a small argument with gravity. You pass the marker stone, the one with a faint carving. No one can read anymore and pause. It's just a rock. But it marks the edge of your strip of land. Not that it's yours. Not really. You work it. You bleed into it. You sometimes dream about it. But the deed belongs to someone else. To a man you've never met. A man who lives in a castle with clean walls and servants whose names he doesn't know. You sigh and move on. The fence is worse than yesterday. One post is completely down, and the others lean like drunks after a long feast. You kneel and start repairs. The wood splinters. The hammer slips. You smash your thumb. You swear quietly. Not a real curse, just a long, whispered, that feels like the universe deserves to hear it. As you work, you remember a story your grandfather used to tell. Something about a saint who tamed wolves with bread. You've never tried it. Bread's too precious, and the wolves here don't seem interested in miracles. You finish the repairs with a level of craftsmanship that can only be described as good enough to make the pigs hesitate. You stand, brush the dirt from your knees, and stretch your back. It responds with a series of noises that sound like someone walking across ice. And you think again about the king. Right now, he might be in his council chamber, or his private study, or his third best sitting room. Does he even know what a bent nail feels like? Probably not. If he sees a fence, it's to admire the view. Not to keep pigs out? He doesn't have to fix things. He just orders them fixed. He speaks and someone else bends. You speak. And the wind ignores you. Historians still debate how much real power medieval kings wielded day to day, whether they ruled with iron fists or were just glorified referees in a never-ending noble slap fight. Either way, you're pretty sure he doesn't worry about fence posts. You walk home under a sky that started spitting tiny bits of icy rain. They hit your face like pinpricks. You ignore it. You've ignored worse. You pass Edric, who's muttering to himself as he hauls a bundle of straw. You both nod. That's enough conversation for one day. Back at the hut, you place the hammer down, wipe your hands on your tunic, and sit by the fire. Your daughter is trying to coax the baby into swallowing a spoonful of broth. It doesn't go well. The baby turns her head and whimpers. You try not to panic. You stare at the flames, watching them curl and dance like they've got secrets. The warmth begins to seep in again. Your clothes steam slightly. You smell like wet wool and pig fence. Dinner is the same as breakfast. The last ladle of pottage, thinned with hot water. You eat it quietly, watching your son scrape the bottom of the pot for bits of barley. Your wife chews with slow precision, like each bite is something to be studied. The baby doesn't eat. Again, you lean back, bones aching, and close your eyes for a moment. Not to sleep, just to remember what it feels like to rest. And in the castle, the king is just starting his own evening ritual. He's in a long hall, lined with torches and polished stone floors. He wears a robe thick, lined with fur, dyed deep blue. Blue. The color of expense. The kind of expense that requires crushing thousands of tiny plants by hand. You once tried to dye your tunic with berries? It turned out brown. And sticky. A servant announces supper. Not in words, just a gentle cough. The king nods and stands. He doesn't touch the door. Doesn't carry a stool. He's escorted. He enters the solar. The table is set with linen. Real linen. Not the scratchy kind spun from old flax stalks. This is imported. It looks like clouds stitched by angels. His food is already waiting. Sliced roast, poached pears, manchet bread, honey from bees that have never seen mud. A swan feather, dipped in gold, sits beside the plate. Not to eat, just for decoration. He sits. He doesn't serve himself. That would be absurd. Music begins soft, plucked notes from a harp. A voice sings a song you've never heard in a language you don't know. The king doesn't really listen. He's thinking about taxes, or marriage alliances, or maybe just which wine goes best with fig-stuffed venison. He takes a bite, one, maybe two. Then he waves his hand, and half the food is cleared away. Just like that. And you lick the spoon and hand it back to your wife, so she can use it again tomorrow. You and the king. 2 dinners under the same rising moon. But only one of you still hears your stomach rumble afterward. The night comes in fast. One moment the trees are gray shadows, and the next, they vanish into black. You close the shutters, not that they do much. Just stiff bits of cloth over gaps in the wall, but they make you feel like you're doing something. The wind still finds its way in, slipping through every crack, licking at your ankles like a stray dog looking for scraps. Your son is coughing again. Dry. Persistent. He tries to hide it with his sleeve. You pretend not to notice, but your wife does. Her mouth tightens. You both know what a cough can become. You scoop a bit of ash from the fire to tamp down the pot. It'll burn longer that way. You save wood wherever you can. A single log costs effort, blood, and stolen time. You plan to make this batch last until morning, though you know deep down it won't. Nothing ever does. It's time to wash. Not because you want to, just because you have to. You scoop gray water from the bucket in the corner. It smells like old feet and forgotten vegetables. You splash a bit onto your face. It's cold enough to knock a gasp out of you. Your skin tightens, goose flesh rising under the damp tunic. You scrub at the dirt on your jawline with a bit of rag. It smears. You give up. You haven't felt clean in years. Not really. Your wife is washing the baby with the same water. Gently, with motions so practiced they look like part of a lullaby. The baby doesn't stir. That's not good. You remember when you had soap? Real soap. Coarse and stinging, made from lye and animal fat. Traded from the town. You used it once to clean your linen for a feast day. It took the skin off your knuckles. You still remember the sting more than the scent. The children take turns dipping their hands in the bucket. It's not sanitation, it's just habit. A small rebellion against the dirt that lives with you, crawls in your bed, and eats your food before you do. Lice. Of course, you've given up trying. You comb through your daughter's hair sometimes, fingers searching for eggs like a thief picking pockets. She always winces. She never cries. Toileting is an outdoor affair. Behind the hut, there's a pit, lined with planks. One of them broke last week. You made a note to fix it. You didn't. You always think you'll have time. But time, like bread, goes too fast and never comes back the same. You step outside, take a quick look around, and do your business with the kind of caution usually reserved for sneaking up on wild animals. You've seen someone fall in. You do not want to repeat that particular medieval horror story. Back inside, your wife is rubbing her hands with nettle salve. She made it herself. It's not good, but it's better than nothing. She offers you some. You take it, more out of solidarity than need. The air in the hut now smells like smoke, feet, boiled barley, and something faintly acidic. You've stopped trying to describe it. It's just home, and somewhere far away. The king is bathing, not washing bathing, not in gray water drawn from a wooden bucket, but in a tub so large you could lie down in it twice, maybe 3 times. The water's warm, not just warm, perfect. Heated in brass kettles by servants whose only task is to tend the bath. He doesn't lower himself in. He is lowered, or eased, or gently placed, like a precious object. The tub is lined with linen. The water is scented with rose petals, lavender, maybe even orange blossom if the traders from the south were generous this month. A servant wipes his face with a cloth soaked in perfumed vinegar. Another rubs his shoulders with oil, not animal fat, almond or olive, imported, pressed by hand. His hair is combed with a boar bristle brush. His nails are clipped. His back is massaged. He does not shiver. He does not curse. He does not fight cold with every breath. Historians still debate how often medieval kings truly bathed. Some accounts claim daily ablutions. Others suggest it was more ceremonial than habitual. But when they did, it was a spectacle, a privilege, a moment to remind everyone that this was not a man, but something elevated wrapped in ritual and rosewater. You pull your tunic tighter, you sit near the fire, you scratch at the rash on your arm that hasn't healed in weeks. You sniff the air and wonder whether it's you or the pot or the straw that stinks more. You ask yourself a question you've asked 1,000 times before. Is this what life is? And the answer comes back the same way it always does. Yeah. For now, you hear a whisper outside, wind, or Edric talking to his chickens again. You don't check. You're too tired? You lie down next to your children. The floor creaks. A mouse runs under the bench. You pretend it's a blessing. A living creature means the house is warm enough to attract life. Your wife crawls in beside you. She doesn't speak. You don't need her to. Her breath is slow, measured, focused. The kind of breathing you do when you're trying not to cry. The fire dims. The room darkens. And in a castle miles away, the king is stepping into silk robes. He's being dusted with fine powders, wrapped in fabrics that cost more than your land will ever produce. Surrounded by people trained to pretend his breath doesn't smell like venison and figs. His skin is dry, smooth, maintained. He is read to, softly, a book of Psalms, or maybe tales from ancient Rome. His eyes droop. A servant removes his slippers. He lies in a bed you could park a cart on. The sheets are warmed. The air smells like citrus and cedar. He exhales. And so do you. Because though the dirt clings and the cold bites and the days drag sleep, at least belongs to everyone. You wake in the dark. Again. Not because it's time, but because your hip hurts from the packed dirt beneath the straw mattress. Because someone rolled over and stole what little blanket there was. Because the baby whimpered in her sleep. And that sound echoes louder than thunder in a one-room hut. You lie still for a moment. The cold has crept in overnight, curled around your ribs like a cat made of ice. You shift slowly. Carefully if you move too fast. Your joints protest with a sound like old wood cracking. No rooster yet. Maybe he froze. Maybe the fox got him. Maybe you just woke too early for even smug poultry. You sit up. Your head thumps with that low, dull ache you've come to associate with hunger. You drank the last of the ale yesterday. You'd kill for a mug of it right now, not because you're thirsty, but because it's easier to swallow than well water, and it makes the world soften around the edges. You reach for your tunic, the same one, still slightly damp from yesterday's storm. It smells worse now. You put it on anyway. It's not a choice, it's a ritual. It's the closest thing you have to consistency. Today, there's work to be done in the Lord's field. Not your field. Not your crops. Not your future. You're walking a mile, maybe more, to spend the day bent over someone else's grain, someone else's soil, someone else's idea of wealth. You won't be paid. That's not how this works. It's corvée labor. You owe it, like taxes or gravity. Historians still debate just how many days per week medieval peasants gave to their lord's fields. Some say 2, others say 5. You don't count. You just go when told and hope your knees hold out. You wrap your head in a cloth to block the wind and pull on your clogs. You kiss your daughter on the forehead, check the fire, and nod once to your wife. No words. Just that nod. Outside, the world is still pretending to sleep. The frost crunches underfoot like broken glass. The sky is turning from black to ash. Your breath fogs and trails behind you like a ghost with nowhere to go. You meet others on the road. Men from the village, heads down, shoulders hunched. You know some names. You don't speak. Talking in the morning is reserved for people with energy and optimism. You're out of both. You reach the field. The reeve is already there, sitting on a horse that looks more fed than you've been all week. He says nothing, just points. You nod. You don't expect kindness. You don't even expect acknowledgement. Just a clear direction. Today's task is muck spreading. Of course it is. You grab a shovel, the handle sticky from 100 other hands, and get to work. The smell hits you like a slap. It clings to your clothes, crawls into your mouth, hides in your beard. You breathe through your mouth. Doesn't help. You try not to gag. Doesn't help either. You scoop, heave, spread, over and over, like some cursed fairy tale punishment. You think about making a joke, but there's no one around to laugh, or they wouldn't find it funny, or you'd cough halfway through it and ruin the timing. You remember once, years ago, when you were a boy, your father brought you to the Lord's field for the first time. You cried when you dropped a bucket of manure. Your father just said, "Better to spill it here than bring it home." You didn't understand what that meant back then. You do now. By midday, your back screams. Your hands are red. You stop to eat. Lunch is half a crust of bread wrapped in cloth, a sliver of dried turnip, and a clove of garlic you found in the bottom of the sack. You chew each bite like it owes you money. It's not satisfying, but it is food. You sit on a rock, back to the wind, chewing slowly and staring at the sky like it might offer answers. It doesn't. It never does. You see the Reeve again, riding by on his fat horse, looking down at you like you're part of the landscape. You wonder what he'd do if you threw your shovel down and walked off. You don't try. You've seen what happens to men who do. In the distance, the castle looms. It's not even that far, really. A half-day's walk. But it might as well be on another planet. Up there, the king has already finished breakfast. A real one. Eggs, bread, meat, fruit from across the sea. Food not just for eating, but for showing off. Now he's probably in court. Not the kind with judges and wigs, no powdered noses yet. Just the royal chamber, polished floors, tapestries thick enough to stop arrows. A chair that isn't quite a throne, but definitely isn't a stool. He listens to petitions. A noble wants land. A merchant wants a license. A bishop wants the taxes adjusted for a holy order that's struggling, though their monastery roof is made of slate and your own still leaks when the clouds so much as think about rain. He barely responds. Just gestures. A nod here. A hand wave there. That's the trick of it. You dig a ditch and sweat through your clothes. He moves a finger and changes lives. Historians still debate whether kings were bored by court life or secretly enjoyed the theater of it all. Your guess, probably both. Like a man who complains about feasting too much but still shows up every night with a gold-plated spoon. You shift on your rock. Your back pops again. You stretch one leg, then the other. You cough once deep, from the chest. It rattles. That's new. You stuff the rest of your turnip in your mouth and stand. The pile of manure hasn't shrunk. Of course it hasn't. You go back to work. Scoop. Heave. Spread. The wind shifts. The stink follows you like a loyal hound. By the time the sun begins to sink, you're too tired to remember your name. But you know the rhythm of the shovel. You could do it in your sleep. You might be doing it in your sleep. The Reeve waves a hand. You stop. No thanks. No payment. Just the end of obligation. You drag yourself home as the sky bleeds into oranges and grays. Your clothes are stiff with filth. You itch in places you don't want to scratch in public. Your stomach rumbles again. Inside the hut, the fire is low. Your wife is rocking the baby. Your son is asleep on the bench. Your daughter is humming something old. Something soft. You sit. You breathe. You're done. For now. And up in the castle, and the king signs a letter and sets it aside. He leans back in his chair, stretches. He's tired too, probably. But not the kind of tired that clings to your bones and whispers you'll still feel this tomorrow. You both work today, but only one of you has to do it again tomorrow, whether he wants to or not. You wake already sore. It's not the slept wrong on your neck sore, it's the kind that seeps into your muscles during the night and makes your limbs feel like they've been replaced with cold rope and stubborn regret. Your hands ache before you move them. Your shoulders burn before you sit up. You sit anyway. Because you always do. Because if you don't, No one else will patch the thatch or check the pig or stir the pot that now contains something resembling soup, but only if you're very generous with your definitions. Your wife is already up. She's stirring the pot with slow, circular movements, staring into it like she's trying to summon a miracle. The baby is quiet. Again, that's worse than crying. You glance at your daughter. She's braiding grass into something. You're not sure what. Probably just to keep her hands busy. There's no food this morning. Not really. The pottage is mostly water with a leaf in it. Either cabbage or something that blew in through the roof. You chew a crust of old bread with the same expression you'd wear while pulling a splinter. Then you rinse your mouth with a bit of ale. It's sour and barely fermented, but it's safer than the well, which started smelling like rot 2 weeks ago. Outside, the pig snorts. You can tell by the rhythm of the sound that she's hungry. Again, you step into your clogs and grab a scrap bucket vegetable ends. Peelings, stale crumbs, and something that might have once been onion. The pig looks at you like you're late. You are. She eats fast, grunting between bites, making you feel like the lazy one. You pat her head and check the compost. There's not much to scrape out. You toss in some straw, stir it with a stick, and walk the perimeter. The fence held overnight. Small victories. Your neighbor waves at you over the wall well. Not a wave exactly. More of a grunt with a hand attached. You return the same. And today is your own work. No lord's land. No corvée. That should be a relief. Right? It isn't. Because now you need to catch up on the things you ignored yesterday. The weeds in your garden, the leaks in the roof, the coop that needs mending, the tools that need sharpening with the stone so smooth it's more suggestion than instrument. And, of course, your own tiny strip of soil. The one patch of ground where you have a say. A narrow wedge of earth that could, in theory, feed your family if the rain doesn't come too late. Or too much. Or with hail in its teeth. You trudge out to it with your hoe, its handle cracked and held together with twine, and begin to work. You loosen soil that doesn't want to loosen. You pull weeds that seem to have a better survival rate than your children. You plant seeds, not because you believe they'll thrive, but because you believe in the possibility that they might. And somewhere, not even 10 miles away, the king is walking in his garden too. But his garden is a display. No weeds, no hunger in the soil. Just carefully curated beds of herbs and flowers imported from places you've only heard about in stories. Gardeners keep it perfect, not for food, but for the optics of serenity, for power, for symmetry, for civilization. You dig in silence as your fingernails go black. Your back curves into the shape of labor. You taste dust in your mouth and feel a blister rise under your thumb. It's nothing new. You remember a time, years ago, when your garden grew 3 turnips the size of your fist. You showed them off to your son like they were royal jewels. You sliced one in half and stared at it like it might glow. You can't remember if it tasted good. But you remember the pride. Historians still debate whether peasants had pride in their work or simply endured out of necessity. You know the answer, it's both. You suffer. Yes, but there's something in watching something grow that says, you matter. A little, you break for lunch. Bread. Again. You swore you had a piece of cheese, but it's gone. Either the mouse took it, or your son did. You don't ask. You just chew and lean against the fence. legs stretched out, eyes closed. The breeze is sharp. You feel it behind your ears and under your chin. You hear a bird call overhead. You smile. Not because it's pleasant, because it's one of the few things that still surprises you. After lunch, you mend the roof. Again, the patch you added last week didn't hold. You climb up, balancing on beams that creak in ways that sound like warnings. You press fresh thatch into place, working it in with your hands. The wind pulls at your tunic, trying to send you off like a poorly written character. Below, your daughter gathers eggs from Edric's chickens. You pretend not to notice. She pretends she found them near the fence. A shared lie, whispered in silence. Later, you tend to the tools. You rub the blade of your knife with a stone so dull it's practically philosophical. You sharpen it anyway, not because it works, but because it used to work. That counts. You rinse your hands in the stream. The water is cold. Your skin tightens instantly. You wonder briefly what it would feel like to bathe. Really bathe. Not just splash, but soak. Like you've read about in those old ballads where kings wash in scented tubs and emerge cleaner than a sermon. The king doesn't sharpen his own knife. He doesn't mend his roof. He doesn't weed or feed pigs or bury compost in the cold. He signs. He speaks. He listens. Sometimes he decides. Usually, and he performs. Always. He puts on his doublet, trimmed with fur. He buttons cuffs made by hands that don't know what blisters feel like. His ring fits snug. His hair is combed. His beard trimmed. Today he might ride out to inspect the lands. Or to hunt. Or just to be seen. Because being seen is part of the job. You pull your tunic tighter. A breeze finds its way down your neck again. You go back to your garden. You rake, plant, and pat the soil like it's a child you hope will behave. Evening's coming. The sun dips. Shadows stretch. Your stomach reminds you that you haven't eaten enough. You wipe your hands on your hose and start toward home. And far away. The king walks into a chamber where tapestries hang thick on every wall. The floor is covered in rugs softer than your bedding, and dinner waits in silver dishes under domes of polished tin. He's not hungry, but he'll eat. You are, and you'll eat too. But only what your hands made possible. The sun lowers behind the trees, setting fire to the sky in shades of gold, rust and bruised purple. It would be beautiful if your neck didn't hurt so much from looking up. You trudge back home, your knees stiff, your fingers stained with soil, and your stomach practicing hunger like it's preparing for a performance. Smoke curls lazily from the chimney, such as it is. Just a hole in the roof with dreams of being functional. You duck inside, the smell of boiled turnip and ash meeting you like an old frenemy. Your wife ladles something from the pot. She doesn't need to say what it is. You already know. Same as yesterday. Same as the day before. If you're lucky, there's a lump of something starchy at the bottom. If you're really lucky, there's a strip of fat from the pig you slaughtered months ago. You know better than to hope for that kind of luck. You sit down on the bench, or what passes for one, just a warped plank on stones that wobble if you shift your weight wrong. Your daughter hands you a bowl, and you nod. She grins. It's the highlight of your evening. Her smile, not the food. You eat slowly. The broth is watery, with occasional resistance from a half-cooked root. You chew methodically, The bread you dip into it has gone hard again, and your teeth feel like they might stage a revolt. You glance at your son. He's chewing like he's been training for it. Determined. Focused. The baby is still quiet. Too quiet. You and your wife lock eyes across the flame for a heartbeat. You both know, but you don't say anything, because saying it makes it real. The baby stirs. Just enough to give you a sliver of hope. You take it. You have to. You finish your food and rinse the bowl with a splash of warmish water from the pot. No soap, no scrubbing. Just enough to pretend. Your wife starts humming as she lays the baby back in the bundle of rags near the fire. A lullaby you remember from when your eldest was that small. It's a song about saints and stars and bread that never runs out. You hum along, not because you believe it, but because it helps. Then comes the knock. Not loud. Just a soft tap on wood that's seen better centuries. You open the door and find a child, muddy-faced, barefoot, holding a bundle of dried herbs tied with string. She said to ask. The girl says, if your wife has anything for the fever. For my sister. You look behind her, no one. Just the wide stretch of dusk and a goat chewing on something questionable. Your wife steps forward, already reaching for her own bundle. She pulls out dried nettles and something that smells sharp and green. She hands it over without a word. The girl nods, offers half a heel of bread in return, and runs off before the cold changes its mind. You close the door. The fire pops. You sit again, and your wife hands you the bread. You break it in half and give her the larger piece. She does the same for you. You both laugh. A real one. Just a puff of breath and surprise. But it counts. The baby coughs. Just once. Then sleeps. You settle in for the night. And up in the castle, the king leans back in a chair carved with dragons and lions and symbols he probably couldn't identify if you handed him a chart. A steward recites the day's accounts numbers that pass by like clouds, abstract and unbothered. The kitchen has served roast boar tonight with chestnuts and rosemary. He's eaten 3 bites and pushed the plate away. He's already thinking about dessert. There's talk of baked apples, honey glazed and stuffed with cloves and raisins. Maybe even marzipan, shaped like animals. Edible pigs. Edible swans. You've never even seen marzipan. You thought it was a kind of soap. A lute plays somewhere in the corner. A low tune, designed not to be noticed. The king swirls his wine and considers the report about the southern shires. There's mention of grain stores being low. Something about poor harvests. He frowns, as if the crops personally offended him. He asks if his own supplies are affected. They aren't. He nods. Moves on. Historians still debate whether kings genuinely cared about the suffering of their peasants, or whether they simply feared the consequences of rebellion. The truth, you suspect, is both. Fear is just another way of caring when you're not the one starving. You shift under your blanket. It scratches your chin, but it's warm. Your daughter is already asleep. Your son, too, curled into himself like a question. Your wife reaches out and touches your hand. You don't pull away. You whisper something, just a fragment of a joke about the bread. She smirks. Outside, the wind whistles a tune that sounds like teeth chattering. You lie back, close your eyes, and try not to cough. And far away, The king walks down a corridor lit with torches that never flicker, his feet wrapped in slippers so soft they make no sound. He is headed to the chapel, not for prayer, but for presents. A few bishops are waiting. One will read aloud. The king will pretend to listen. Later, he'll return to his chambers, be undressed by careful hands, and climb into a bed so wide it could host a debate. The sheets will be warm. The room will be still. He'll sleep, eventually. But not before wondering just for a moment what it might be like to wake with calluses instead of titles. You're not sure what woke you. Might have been the baby shifting, or the wind slipping through a fresh crack in the wall, or your back just deciding enough is enough. Either way, your eyes open to darkness so complete it feels like the world's been erased. There's no rooster, no fire, no reason to be awake. But you are. You listen to the sounds around you, the soft breathing of your daughter, the raspy wheeze of your son, the faintest stir from the pig pen outside. The silence hums in your ears, louder than any market noise. You shift slightly and the straw crunches, dry and whispering like old parchment. There's something in this quiet that presses on your chest. It's not sadness exactly, it's the weight of repetition, of knowing tomorrow will look like today. Just colder, and a little more tired. You stare at the rafters. There's a hole up there you've been meaning to fix. You can see a sliver of starlight. You try to remember the last time you looked at the sky on purpose, not to check for rain or squint at a storm, just to look. Nothing comes to mind. You let your eyes drift closed again, just as the rooster finally remembers his job. His crow splits the dark like a bad joke. The pig groans in reply. Your wife shifts beside you. You both pretend to still be asleep. It's too early for words. Eventually, you rise, you don't stretch. Stretching is for people with options. You pull on your tunic, still damp in one sleeve, and shuffle outside to start the fire. Again, it takes 3 tries to get it going. Your flint is getting old. So are your fingers. The flame catches and you blow carefully, shielding it like it's a secret. The light dances on the walls. It almost feels warm. You ladle what's left of yesterday's pottage into the pot. Add water. Stir. The smell is faintly sour but edible. That's what counts. Your daughter wakes first. She doesn't speak, just reaches for the bread and dips it in the pot like it's a ceremony. Your son follows, coughing hard enough to make you wince. He wipes his mouth and eats like he's got a race to win. You give him a smile, he doesn't see it. Your wife takes her share, then gives most of it to the baby. The child drinks from a spoon like it's a luxury. You pretend it is. This is breakfast, which is a strong word for whatever's left. It's warm, at least. Later, you'll try to mend the bucket. One of the staves has split, and the last time you filled it, half the water ended up in your shoes. After that, you'll spread ashes in the garden to ward off slugs. If there's time, you'll check the fence again. And in the castle, they're just sitting down to dine. Not breakfast. A meal? A performance? The king is led into a private chamber, perhaps the solar, with its high windows and mosaics of stained glass. The light filters in like a painting. His table is already set. It's a feast, even when no one's invited. There's manchet bread, soft and white. Honey, sausages made of venison and herbs you've only smelled once. Poached eggs, roasted apples, cream from cows that never see mud. A servant announces each dish. Another tastes each one. Not for flavor, for poison. Historians still debate how common poisonings were in medieval courts. But when you're king, paranoia is a condiment. He sips his wine, diluted with water because his physician says it's better that way. He doesn't care. He just likes the color. Someone plays a lute in the corner. Someone else recites a poem. The king is half listening, mostly planning. Not his meal. His afternoon. He'll meet with nobles. Review trade documents. Stamp wax seals with a ring you could trade for a dozen oxen and still have enough left for a new roof. He'll approve a decree about land rights. Or inheritance. Or marriage. Somewhere in that parchment, a name like yours might appear. It won't matter. You'll still need to fix the bucket. You leave the hut with a cloth wrapped around your shoulders. You head toward the stream with your cracked bucket and a prayer that it holds long enough to make it back without a second bath. The water is clear today. That's not always a good sign. It means nothing's stirring beneath it. The frogs have gone quiet and the fish are gone. You fill the bucket slowly, trying not to spill. On the way back, your foot slips on the icy path. You land on your knee with a grunt that's equal parts pain and profanity. The water sloshes out. You don't go back. You just limp home with what's left and a new bruise that will keep you company for days. You hand the water off and sit. The pig needs tending. The garden needs turning. The thatch still leaks. You sigh, it's only mid-morning. And the king. He's reviewing plans for a hunting party. The hounds are already howling in anticipation. The falconer stands ready. A fresh tunic has been laid out, embroidered with gold thread. His boots are clean, always clean. They never touch mud. He'll ride out with a troop of attendants and nobles, through woods cleared of danger by men you'll never meet. He'll chase a deer he won't skin. He'll strike a boar he won't cook. He'll return triumphant because that's the rule: the king always wins the hunt. Even when he misses, a feast will follow. You wonder what that feels like, being full. Not just with food, but with success that doesn't hurt your back. Your wife hands you a bit of dried meat. A rare treat. Probably traded for extra spinning. You tear it slowly, savoring each chew like it's a song. And when your daughter sings softly to the baby, you smile. Because even here, where the food is thin and the work never ends, you still have something the king doesn't. A moment. A real one. The clouds roll in thick by mid-afternoon. Their bellies sagging with rain you don't want and don't need. You feel it coming in your knees before it hits the roof. You always do. That's the kind of weather forecasting that comes from years of planting in soil that doesn't listen to prayers. You patch the roof again. Third time this month? It's less repair and more argument with gravity. You press handfuls of straw and wet clay into the gaps, muttering under your breath like it might help the mixture hold. It doesn't. Your hands are raw from the cold, and your fingers throb where last week's splinters never quite healed. You suck on a knuckle and taste dirt. At this point, you think your blood might just be mud with ambition. From below, your wife calls out it's time. You climb down slowly, joints complaining all the way, and follow her to the chapel. It's Sunday. You'd forgotten. That happens sometimes. Days blur when your life is just a sequence of waking, working, eating, and collapsing. But the priest notices when you miss a mass. The reeve notices. God notices. They say you're not sure, but you don't want to find out. The chapel is stone, cold, and older than most memories in the village. It smells like wax and wet wool. You sit on a bench that's been worn smooth by generations of exhausted posteriors. The priest is already speaking. Latin, of course. You don't understand the words, but the rhythm is familiar, like a lullaby wrapped in incense and expectation. You stand, you kneel, you mutter, Amen. You follow the steps like a dance learned in childhood. It doesn't matter what the words mean. They feel sacred. That's enough. You glance around at your neighbors, faces lined with years and wind and the weight of duty. No one looks up. Everyone looks tired. Even the priest, who smells like wine and talks like he's bargaining with something invisible. Historians still debate how much the church truly shaped daily medieval life. You could tell them it shaped everything. It's not just sermons and saints. It's when you eat, when you fast, when you rest, when you bury your dead. Faith isn't decoration. It's infrastructure. You listen as the priest blesses the field, prays for the sick, and gently reminds everyone that donations can be left at the altar. You have no coin. You press a dried leaf into the offering box instead. He'll pretend not to notice. You file out after the service, your children clinging to your cloak. Outside, the sky is darker, the wind sharper. But for a moment, standing in the doorway of the chapel, you feel like something might be watching over you, or at least nearby. Your wife makes the sign of the cross and whispers something to St. Bridget, or St. Isidore, or maybe both. You don't ask, you just nod. And somewhere else entirely, the king is kneeling too, not on stone but on cushions. Not in a crumbling chapel, but a palace sanctuary, lit with stained glass and gold leaf. A bishop stands beside him, muttering psalms that actually do make sense to their audience, because the king learned Latin, or at least enough of it to fake a thoughtful nod. The priest speaks not just to the king, but for him. He offers prayers for the realm, for the harvest, for the souls of fallen knights. The king listens. Sort of, he's thinking about alliances, about whether the Pope is likely to approve his cousin's marriage, about what to do if the northern barons start grumbling again. He makes the sign of the cross not just as devotion, but as performance. The nobles in the pews behind him mirror it instantly, like clockwork. His chapel smells like roses and frankincense, not sweat and fear. It's cleaner than your whole village. You've heard it said that one gold candlestick from the royal altar could buy every house in your hamlet and still leave enough for bread. He kneels in front of saints painted in luminous blues and reds. His confessor listens to his sins. Small ones, usually. Pride. A forgotten feast day. A sharp word to a bishop. Nothing that draws blood. Your sins are different. They come in the form of snapped rope, broken fences, and things you said when you were too hungry to be kind. You make your own peace. You walk back to the hut slowly, letting your daughter balance on the ruts in the path while your son kicks at a rock, like it owes him money. The baby rests in your wife's arms. Her breathing is steadier now. Still warm. Still here. You reach your door just as the sky opens up and dumps a sheet of rain across the yard. The pig grunts and retreats into her shelter. You all laugh, just for a second, as the wind chases you inside. You wrap yourselves in what passes for blankets. Your wife rubs the baby's feet to keep them warm. You poke the fire and add the last 2 logs. The rain hits the roof like an army marching overhead. And far above, the king sits in his chambers, reading a letter by candlelight. Not reading. Technically, a clerk reads it aloud. A report about a distant province. Something about unrest. A failed harvest. A death toll. The king sighs, tells the clerk to draft a letter, says something about providence and prayer, then asks for mulled wine. His chaplain lights a candle for the dead. The king lifts a goblet for the living. You sit back, warm for the first time all day. And you pray too. Not with words. Just in the way you hold your children a little tighter. And for tonight, at least, it's enough. Rain still taps the roof like a nervous messenger, sending droplets down the clay-packed walls where the patching didn't hold. You catch one in your hand without thinking. It's cold, cleaner than your wash water, almost tempting. Your wife has already fallen asleep, one hand still resting near the baby's blanket. The children lie curled like dogs at the edge of the fire's glow, their breath slow, their limbs tangled in dreams in each other. You lie on your side, staring at the wooden beam above your head. You think of your own father, of how he used to say, "Rain feeds the earth, but starves the fire." At the time, you thought he meant the hearth. Now you know he meant you. Your belly groans. Not loudly. Just a low complaint. You've already eaten everything edible in the hut, save a carrot you're saving for the baby's broth. You try not to think about food. You try to think about anything else, like your wedding day. It was spring. The trees were full of bees and blossoms. You wore your only decent tunic, the one without holes. Your wife braided her hair and tied it with a bit of ribbon passed down from her grandmother. The priest rushed the ceremony because he had a toothache. You both laughed after standing under a crooked elm that leaned like it was eavesdropping. You had bread that day. Cheese, too. And 3 apples so crisp they cracked when you bit them. You remember the sound more than the taste. You remember her smile. It looked like a sunrise with a secret. You blink back into the present. The fire has shrunk to embers. The smell of ash and wet wool fills the room like an old argument. You roll over and close your eyes. Somewhere, hours later, you dream of eating. Not a feast. Just bread. Warm. Soft. Fresh. A heel of mancha dipped in honey. A slice of white cheese. Maybe even a fig. Something sweet. Something absurd. You wake to someone coughing. It's your son. He's huddled near the door, wrapped in your old cloak. You touch his forehead. Cool. Not fevered. Just tired. Like you. You give him the carrot. He doesn't argue. You step outside just as the first light of day smears across the sky like an ink blot. The air is damp. Your breath forms clouds that vanish before they can become something useful. The pig squeals at you from her pen. She's stepped in something disgusting. So have you. You get to work anyway. There's a broken wheel on the cart. You don't remember it breaking. But that doesn't matter. You fix it or you wedge a stone under it. Hammer a wedge into place. and pretend it won't collapse the next time someone sneezes near it. Your hands shake a little. You pause. You know what this means? You're getting sick. Again. You pull your cloak tighter, cough once deep, and sharp, and keep moving. And up in the castle he's already dressed. Today is an official court day. That means ceremony. That means presents. He wears a deep red tunic embroidered with thread finer than your best twine. His cloak has a brooch shaped like a lion's head. His fingers are heavy with rings. His hair has been oiled and combed until it gleams like polished oak. He sits on a throne. Not the big one that's for coronations. This is the everyday throne. Still gilded, still uncomfortable, still a symbol, one by one. Nobles approach. A baron complains about a dispute over river rights. A bishop asks for land to build a new cloister. A merchant offers rare spice in exchange for access to the port. The king listens. He nods. He says, "Let it be done." And the scribes write it down like it came from heaven. Then come the commoners. A miller says his neighbor stole grain. A widow asks for help after her husband was crushed by a cart. A boy claims he saw a demon in the woods. The king waves most of them away. There's only so much time. Only so much patience. Historians still debate whether kings ruled by divine right or by administrative exhaustion. You suspect both are true. At lunch, he eats pears poached in cinnamon wine. He barely tastes them. A minstrel recites a poem about knights and dragons. He yawns halfway through. The dragon wins. The court claps. Back in the village, you're feeding the pig. She bites your hand. Not hard, just enough to remind you that she's hungry too. You give her the last of the peels. Your wife is spinning again. Your daughter is singing a song with no words. Your son is asleep near the fire. You sit down and rub your hands. They feel heavy. The rain has stopped. The roof still leaks. You wonder if tomorrow will be better. You know it won't. But you wonder anyway. In the castle, the king stares out a window that's taller than your hut. He sees clouds. Fields. Maybe a falcon flying. He thinks about tomorrow too. Not because he has to, just because even kings want to believe in something that might surprise them. You don't know what day it is. Not because you've forgotten, because it doesn't matter. The church bells toll on Sundays, but only if the priest remembers. And half the time you're in the field. You're back to the sky. Your hands in dirt when they ring. You measure time by what hurts, by what grows, and by what breaks. Today, it's your shovel. You're digging out a root in the corner of your plot. Something's been choking the barley, and with one good heave, the handle snaps in two. You stare at it for a moment, not angry, just tired. You pick up the head of the shovel, tuck it under your arm, and walk toward the shed. Shed is generous. It's 3 planks and a prayer. Inside, you find your backup. A hoe with a splintered grip and a wobble you pretend not to notice. You go back to digging. Around midday, your wife appears with a scrap of cloth and a bit of something wrapped inside. Lunch. She sits beside you on a log and opens at a piece of rye bread, slightly burned, and what might be turnip paste. You both eat without speaking. She doesn't ask if your back hurts. She knows. You don't ask if her wrists are sore from spinning. You know. You watch a bird flit across the sky, low and fast. You haven't seen many birds lately. That worries you more than you'd admit. Fewer birds means fewer seeds, Fewer seeds means nothing grows. You take another bite of bread and chew it until it becomes something resembling food. You want to say something nice, something kind. Instead, you say, the pig's getting fatter. She nods. That's a good sign. A fat pig means meat for winter. Maybe enough to trade for salt or a bit of wool. Maybe even a new pot. You lost the last one when it cracked over the fire last week. It fell apart like it was just waiting for the moment to ruin dinner. You finish your bread and hand her the cloth. She folds it, tucks it into her belt, and goes back toward the hut. You watch her walk away, the back of her shift patched with old fabric from a child's gown. She walks slow. Her ankles are swelling again. You go back to digging, and somewhere far from mud, far from root-clogged soil, the king walks in his treasury. Yes, he has one. Not a room. A suite. Stone walls lined with chests, each one locked, labeled, and guarded by a man who's memorized everyone's face and fears no one but the steward. The king inspects a newly arrived crate silk from the east, pepper in tiny bags worth their weight in silver, a goblet made from carved ivory. He picks it up, runs a thumb along the rim. It's smooth, cold, useless. He nods anyway. He's thinking about the next banquet, not the food his cooks know what to prepare. Not the guests his chamberlain manages invitations. He's thinking about the performance, because a feast isn't about eating. It's about showing power, showing wealth, showing favor to one duke and subtle distance to another. His tailors will dress him. His jeweler will select something with red stone, symbol of strength. His confessor will sit near the back, where he can be seen but not heard. Historians still debate whether medieval banquets were truly opulent or exaggerated by chroniclers with a flair for drama. The truth: they were worse than you think. More food than your village sees in a month. Songs, dances, dishes sculpted into shapes of mythical beasts. Live peacocks plucked, cooked, and redressed in their own feathers. And you return home and find your wife rubbing salve into the baby's feet. The fever's back. Her skin is pale and hot. Your daughter sits nearby, threading bits of dried grass into a loop. You think it's a crown. You don't ask. Dinner is porridge. Barley? Water? Salt if you're lucky. Tonight, you are not lucky. You scrape the bottom of the pot and split what's left between your children. You chew on the crust of bread and let it soften in your mouth until it stops fighting your teeth. You drink ale. Weak. Sour. Better than water. The stream smells wrong again. You spit something into the fire. It hisses. You think of the king's goblet again. Polished. Clean. Probably cold to the touch. Probably filled with wine so dark it stains the memory. You sit on the bench and count the logs left by the hearth. 3. Maybe enough for tonight? Maybe not. The rain starts again. Outside. The pig grunts. You hear something in the trees. Might be wind. Might be Edric. Might be worse. You add one log to the fire, on just one. You sit back and rub your eyes. And up in the palace, the king's feast is beginning. The hall is lit with torches and chandeliers. Musicians play a slow tune, something with lutes and high voices. A jester performs near the end of the table, juggling apples carved into the faces of nobles no one dares name aloud. The king laughs. Just once. Just enough. He eats a bite of lamb, seasoned with herbs grown in a garden tended by monks. He sips wine, listens to poetry, and for a moment, his thoughts drift. Not to you, not to your hunger or your fire or your sick child, but to himself. Always to himself. Because being king is performance, and so is being a peasant. You perform strength. He performs power, but only one of you bleeds when the shovel breaks, and only one of you notices when it rains. You wake before light again, but this time it's different. It's not the fire or the cold or even the baby who sleeps so still now. It makes your heart pause every time you glance at her. No, it's something else. A heaviness in your chest that doesn't quite hurt but feels like it should. You sit up slowly, joints stiff, muscles reluctant. Your breath rattles. Deep. Sticky. Your wife hears it. She turns her head but doesn't speak. She sees your face and lowers her eyes instead. You both know, but neither of you says it. You put on your tunic like you're preparing for battle. Which you are, in a way, not with swords, not with words, but with the day, the hour, the next task that refuses to wait. You reach for your boots clogs, really, and tug them on. They feel heavier today, or maybe your legs are just weaker. You go outside. The air smells like wet earth and old bark. The kind of morning that seems quiet only because the world hasn't decided what to do with itself yet. The pig's already rooting around, nosing through a pile of turnip skins. You nod at her. She grunts back. Probably just indigestion, but it feels like companionship. You check the fence. Again, still holding, just barely. A gust of wind might end the illusion, but not today. You walk toward the stream. Each step feels longer than the last. By the time you reach the bank, you're wheezing a little. You crouch, dip the bucket, watch as water fills it. Clear and calm, like it doesn't know it might make someone sick. You stand slowly. You make it 10 steps before the world tilts sideways. You drop the bucket, you lean against a tree, and for a minute, just one, you let yourself rest. You don't usually do that. Not because there isn't time, but because there isn't permission. But today, something inside you whispers it's fine. You sit down on a rock, close your eyes, and try not to shiver. Your fingers are tingling. You cough once into your sleeve. Quietly. You glance at your hand. There's blood. Only a little. You say nothing. You walk home slower than usual. Every joint creaks. Your legs argue. Your head spins every time you look down. Your wife meets you at the door. She knows. She helps you sit. She places a cloth on your forehead. You don't argue. Later, the priest comes. He doesn't bring healing. Just words. Rituals. A candle. He murmurs prayers while you stare at the ceiling beam, the one with the crack that splits the grain into a crooked smile. He asks if you wish to confess. You nod. You speak softly. No grand sins. Just the quiet ones, impatience. A stolen egg. A lie to a neighbor about why you couldn't help fix a cart last week. He gives a blessing. You feel no different. The baby cries. You smile. At least she's still loud. Your children gather near the fire. They don't ask what's wrong. They know better. You close your eyes again. And far away, the king walks into a hall filled with light and conversation. A diplomat from a foreign land is visiting. There will be gifts exchanged, spices. Perhaps. Cloth? Maybe a trained monkey or a carved box with a mirror inside. The king listens, nods, speaks in phrases his advisors rehearsed with him earlier. There is a toast. The room erupts in polite laughter. Later, he'll retreat to his study. He'll sip from a goblet. A servant will read aloud letters from nobles and priests. One of them will mention a famine in the western fields. Another will report sickness in the villages. He'll frown, make a note. He may even sign a parchment to release grain from the royal stores if the steward thinks it wise. Then he'll move on. He has a hunting trip to prepare for. His falconer has trained a new bird. He must show interest. Historians still debate whether kings had genuine compassion or simply ruled with pragmatic detachment. The truth is probably somewhere between. And somewhere in a village that doesn't have a name on any map, you lie back, your hand on your chest, your breath growing shallow. Your wife whispers your name. You smile. Barely. You remember the feel of spring dirt under your fingernails, the taste of onions roasted in fat, your daughter's song, your son's crooked smile when he stole an apple last harvest. You try to say something, you don't need to. She already knows. And up in the castle, the king leans out of a window and watches the stars rise. He feels the weight of his crown, even when it's not on his head. He wonders briefly if he's made the right choices. Then he turns away from the night, and you close your eyes and rest. Not because the work is done, but because you are. The next morning, your wife wakes alone. The fire's burned low. The pig is grunting. The roof is still leaking. The world is unchanged in every way that matters. She doesn't cry. She doesn't scream. She doesn't even sigh. She wraps her cloak around her shoulders and checks the baby first. The child's fever has broken. Then she goes about the day. Because there are mouths to feed. There's wood to gather. There's the patch of soil you planted last week. The one she'll now have to tend alone. She'll tell the priest by sunset. He'll say some words in Latin over the place where they bury you just behind the chapel, near the wall where the nettles grow tallest. There won't be a headstone, maybe a wooden cross. If time allows. Maybe not. The children will help dig the grave. Not because they should, but because that's how things are. And when you're lowered into the earth, it'll be with your hands still calloused, your tunic still patched, your belt still a piece of rope tied twice to hold. No one will write your name in a chronicle, but the fence you fixed will hold through winter. The pig will live long enough to be traded for flour and wool. The field you dug will still turn green come spring. That's legacy enough. And in the castle the king coughs. Just once. It echoes in the chamber. Servants glance at one another. A steward whispers something to the physician. The king waves them away, says he's fine, insists it's nothing, but his fingers tremble when he lifts the goblet. Later that night, he retires early. A servant lights a candle near his bed. Another draws the curtains. The king stares at the ceiling, tracing the painted beams with tired eyes. He thinks about the treaty he signed today. The feast next week, the son he's sending to court in Burgundy. He thinks about how tired he feels and how he's not allowed to say so. The room smells of lavender and parchment. He dreams of a hunt, of being barefoot in a forest without a name. Historians still debate what makes a king great, whether it's the wars he won or the cathedrals he built. But they rarely ask whether he was kind. or whether he was ever happy. Because kings are remembered for what they leave behind, even when they wish they could be forgotten. The king dies 3 weeks later. Not suddenly, not peacefully, just slowly. Surrounded by people who whisper his name like it's already past tense. His corpse is washed, oiled, wrapped in silk. He is buried in a crypt with gold lining, next to men whose names have already blurred in memory. There's a procession. Horses, priests, trumpets. People gather to watch him be lowered into marble. But most of them do not remember what he looked like. They remember the tax he raised, the bread that never arrived, the war he didn't win, the peace he couldn't keep. One man dies in silence, surrounded by his children. The other dies to music, attended by strangers, and both are gone. Because death, in the end, doesn't care how many rooms you owned, or how many people bowed when you passed. It only cares that you were here and now you're not. The world turns. Again, the pig is traded, the children grow, the king is replaced, the field is plowed. The songs continue, and the wind carries both names away with equal silence. And now, it's quiet again. The fire has dimmed. The world has turned once more. You're lying in your bed, eyes soft with sleep, your breath steady, your body wrapped in the kind of warmth we spend our lives searching for. You've walked through fields of barley and halls of gold. You've felt the weight of hunger, of crowns, of time. You've lived 2 lives at once, one wrapped in wool, the other in velvet. One scraped against the earth, the other perched above it. But in the stillness now, there's no rope belt or jeweled ring. There's just you. Breathing. Resting. And that's enough. Because in the end, the stories we carry, the ones tucked behind our ribs like folded letters, are what remain. The lullabies we hummed, the walls we built, the names we whispered to stars, even when we couldn't remember why. Tonight, as you slip further into sleep, let the fences mend themselves, let the kings crown themselves. You've done enough. So rest your hands. Close your eyes. Let the past be quiet now. The fields are sown. The court is adjourned. And the only sound left is the wind, drifting gently through your thoughts like a lullaby. Soft. Still. Safe. Good night. Canada.